We're back, and this week we're looking at the tail of the 944 Porsche 948, in fact. So if you watched the initial episode, the first installment if you like, and you're an eagle-eyed carburetor fanatic, you probably spotted that we had a quadrajet in there to start with, which Kurt had kicking around his garage. Well, they might be good for your gasser, your drag strip queen, but generally speaking, they're bloody useless. Something to do with the floats. Anyway, fuel starvation in cornering, which is not good for a race car. So we threw that away and installed this fancy looking piece of kit, which actually has been brilliant ever since. We did have it rebuilt recently because it just wasn't running so good, but fabulous carburetor, does the job perfectly. Having got the car running, we took it down to Phoenix, to the old Thunderbird track actually, for a bit of a shakedown, and that's exactly what it was. Shook itself apart. So that all important thrust converter, torque converter, whatever it is, flux capacitor, that destroyed itself, or rather we destroyed it. And here's why. And this is an important thing if you're going to do this conversion. This is critical. Where the actual drive shaft in the torque tube, at the back end, where it meets the transmission, there is a Porsche coupling for the two bits to marry to each other. Because of course the engine is different and therefore positioned differently, and the distance between that and the transmission is inherently different too. You have to take extraordinarily accurate measurements to line everything up, and that torque converter device is helpful in that respect. But at the same time, you have to get it absolutely spot on, because otherwise what happens is what happened to us, and the pilot bearing, which puts the drive shaft into the motor, if that's not in as far as it should be, then it starts waggling around like a dick in a bucket and destroying things very quickly and very horribly. Quite ugly, all in all. The telltale sign is clutch fluid pissing out everywhere, and that's what we discovered when we took it for its first test run. Our initial solution on repositioning this, which we did measure as carefully as we could, was to try and cut an additional notch, which you can see here. Well, you can't see the additional notch, but you can see the factory one in this diagram. We cut an additional notch in that transmission shaft to try and line it all up with the measurements that we'd taken. And honestly, this stuff is rock hard, super hard steel, and whether it slipped or whether we got it in the wrong place, I don't honestly know. But it destroyed itself very quickly. The long-term solution, which came much later, honestly, after we'd overheated the engine and failed at one race, put in a new motor, destroyed another thrust converter, gone out again, and eventually decided that we had to come up with a better solution for all this. And the solution was to extend the coupling by exactly the right amount, which puts the coupling bolt perfectly in line with the factory notch in the transmission shaft. As always with these things, measure twice, cut once, measure 5 times if you have to. because it's going to cost you a load of time. The amount of times we had that transmission in and out the back end, I've lost count. Good thing is, I can tell you, you can remove and replace the transmission within a couple of hours if you've done it often enough to know what you do. So, as I think I mentioned, one of the first screw-ups at an actual race, once we got everything else sorted out, was the motor overheating, sadly. A very short-lived race at the fantastic circuit here in Arizona, which is a bit of a treat because we normally have to drive to California for a race. Way down south, past Tucson, in Wilcox, the Indy Motorsports track. Yeah, didn't last long, overheated. The good thing about that was that the boys, Rick and Kurt, had another Chevy motor that they had intended to put into a dirt car, which really never came about. And so, seeing as it was sitting there doing nothing, we threw that in, and it had a bit of a tweaky cam. And wow, the difference was amazing, honestly. So much more power, so much more responsive. Fantastic. So that was a result. Except, of course, we hadn't resolved the whole thrust converter thing at the time, so we blew up another one of those when we swapped the motor out for the new motor. We blew up another thrust converter, and I think that was at the next race because we thought we knew what we were doing, but we didn't. And that's when we came up with the proper solution. At the same time, we had to come up with a solution for the overheating issue because we figured it would just happen again with the new motor. And Rick found this amazing desert racing website all about ridiculous cars that go racing in the dirt, in the desert, having to clearly cope with serious heat, which, you know, we expected to find. The first race I ever did at Button Willow, it was 116 degrees in California. So this unit has a massive expansion tank, pipes everywhere. Honestly, it was very complicated, but Rick worked it all out because that's the kind of guy he is. And we got this whole system plumbed in. We also had a double pass radiator, slightly bigger than the one we had before, so we had to chop all the bodywork out the way, get some more airflow into that. Scoops in the hood to increase the airflow into the rad, block it all off nicely as well so none of the air went to waste. And again, years later, that has proved to be just about efficient enough, and I mean it, because, you know, we still run at between 190 to 220 degrees, and you know, sometimes when you're really pushing it, it starts creeping above 220, and that's too hot. So, you know, there's still room for improvement there, honestly. If you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments, because we'd love to hear them. Other improvements that we undertook were the master cylinder reservoirs. Swapped out the standard Porsche unit that we'd relocated, but it was still kind of in the way. That was half the problem, honestly. So we put in this unit, relatively inexpensive, honestly, and beautifully compact. David did most of the work on that, actually. Nice job, mate. Then at some point, despite the fact we've done like half a dozen races and never been questioned about it, we had to completely rethink the whole fuel system, because despite the fact Ricky Booby had drilled some holes in the fuel tank, we actually replaced that with a brand new one, not brand new one, but yeah, second-hand tank, which didn't have holes in it, which was good. Cured the fuel leak somewhat. Anyway, Lemons didn't like the fact that the fuel tank, the stock fuel tank, was specifically designed for fuel injection. and of course the Chevy motor was carburetor, and therefore it was kind of not compatible as far as they were concerned in terms of safety. So it was at High Plains Raceway in Colorado where they decided that we needed to do something about it immediately, which we fixed amazingly, cobbled together with all kinds of bits and pieces. And that was a temporary solution. The final solution was to go the fuel cell route, safer all round, honestly, if you're racing. And so Matt and I installed the fuel cell, which has proved to be very efficient in terms of not leaking. Not so efficient in terms of holding fuel. It's supposed to be a 17-gallon tank, and yet we're calculating that it only kind of actually holds 15, which is a bit of a pain, because we're endurance racing. Over the years, in addition to our sophisticated solutions, we've come up with some redneck solutions to various problems, including even getting the car into the garage because we're just too lazy to push it up the hill. Okay, gently does it. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. Gently. Beautiful. Beautiful. Gently. Okay. Whoa. 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 The team itself, over the years, had whittled itself down to just Rick and I in terms of drivers. And we did a couple of races just with the two of us, which I have to say is extraordinarily hard work and not recommended. We finished our first race at Laguna Seca, which was monumental. And that was just the two of us driving that weekend, exhausting. Meantime, I had met David Molesworth via the Lancia Stratos forums, and at the drop of a hat, he agreed to come and drive one weekend. And it was the weekend of the ridiculous snowfall here in Arizona. We had 2 foot of snow here in Sedona as Betsy and I left one evening to set off for Phoenix to meet David. And there was still snow on the track when we started the next day, and this was at Wilcox, right on the border. Then we managed to cajole another friend of ours, Matt Francis, into the team, and we now have a full team of 4. Matt is actually an astrophysicist, so he brings a degree of science to everything that we're doing in these days. We're not really sure what David does.
But we don't know who he is.
Oh, I nearly forgot, and I got it slightly wrong, honestly. The first race was actually at Sonoma, and we didn't blow anything up. Apart from the CV joints, the half shafts, drive shafts at the back, we had invested unwisely in some not 100% Porsche parts. I think they were VW parts and they're supposed to do the job. Anyway, they disintegrated after 5 laps. You can actually rebuild these, contrary to what the suppliers say. And there's some really good videos out there on YouTube about how to do it. It's a bit like one of those metal puzzles that you get in a Christmas cracker. So yes, that was the first race. And then we went to Wilcox, and then we overheated the motor. And then we went to Wilcox, and we blew up the transmission. We disintegrated the transmission that had been very kindly donated to us. It was a standard Porsche 944 transmission, and I'm guessing the extra power just annihilated it, honestly. Yeah. So the solution to that was very simple. A 944 turbo transmission unit, able to cope with a little bit more power and additional cooling. So it has this weird and wonderful, very kind of cool actually, oil cooler built into it. And because we were getting quite cocky at replacing transmissions in and out by then. We forgot to do the measurements quite so accurately. That's when we blew up the thrust and went all the way to Button Willow just to do the warm-up laps before it disintegrated. So I think that just about covers it. So that's about it for now. That's where we're at. I've left out loads of things, probably. Certainly plenty of funny stories about trips to races. Maybe I'll do some of those, who knows. So thanks again for watching. I hope this particular episode was useful because it's explored all the modifications that we had to make after we actually got the car up and running to make it reliable, and that's what endurance racing is all about. Honestly, it's continual development to make it better, more reliable. We're looking at power steering at the moment, electric power steering, so it doesn't take any power from the motor. We're looking at, what else are we looking at? Oh, I forget, crazy ideas. So if you haven't subscribed already, please do so, and please encourage other people to come and watch my lunacy. See you soon.